You feel the chill of dawn, see torches flickering in the alleys of a village surrounded by high stone walls. This is Transylvania in the 1430s, a land of dark fortresses and blood oaths. If these images have piqued your curiosity, subscribe to the channel now, leave a like that strengthens our kingdom of stories, and comment on which part of this medieval past most sparks your imagination. This way, our community grows like a loyal army, ready for new adventures. Vlad was born in 1431 in a small fortified house in the Saxon city of Sayushuara. While his father, Vlad II, served the Hungarian crown, he did not open his eyes in a fairy tale palace, but at a political crossroads. On one side, the powerful Kingdom of Hungary, on the other, the growing Ottoman Empire, and in between, tiny Wallachia, a principality valuable as a bridge between Christian Europe and the Muslim East. His surname, Dracula, literally meant son of the dragon, because Vlad II had just joined the Order of the Dragon, a brotherhood of knights sworn to defend Christendom. But bearing this coat of arms did not guarantee protection. Every ally could turn traitor the next moon, and at any moment a messenger could arrive with news of an invasion or conspiracy. Vlad's childhood was marked by training in the castle courtyard, amid the clang of wooden swords and foreign language lessons. He learned Latin to negotiate with papal emissaries, Hungarian to deal with the neighboring court, and Church Slavonic to pray for the living and the dead. As a child, he listened to his father plan tributes to keep the Ottomans at bay, while simultaneously swearing oaths of loyalty to the Hungarian king, a dangerous game of balance of power that rarely ended well. At banquets, bards sang of knights facing dragons, but the true monster stalking Wallachia was ruthless politics. If his father chose the wrong ally, the entire family could be dethroned or executed before sunrise. As he grew older, Vlad realized that his noble title was no armor against the ambition of local barons, the boyars, who changed allegiances like cloaks. He heard tales of relatives poisoned and castles stormed while their lords slept. These nighttime whispers taught the young prince a crucial lesson. In Wallachia, ruling was less about gleaming scepters and more about surviving the next dagger thrust. It was in this cauldron of fragile alliances that Vlad forged the resolve the world would later know as pure cruelty, but which to him was merely a defensive tactic in hostile territory. When Vlad II was summoned to Nuremberg to receive the black cloak embroidered with an emerald dragon, it was not just a prestigious ritual. It was a declaration of war against any threat to Christianity. The Order of the Dragon, founded by King Sigismund of the Holy Roman Empire, brought together princes sworn to protect Europe's borders from the Ottoman advance. By accepting the emblem, Vlad II also bestowed upon his eldest son the title of Dracula, son of the dragon, a name that echoed strength and destiny. From that moment on, Vlad III began training not only as a future ruler, but also as a knight tempered by an almost sacred ideal to defend his land at any cost. The emblem on the family banners, a dragon entwined with a red cross, became a symbol of respect and fear. In processions, Vlad as a child would march behind his father, absorbing the gravity of his sermons on loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. In practice, however, the order's protection meant sending men and gold to the Hungarian king's campaigns, leaving little Wallachia with scarce resources. Vlad learned early on that bearing such a weighty oath could be both an honor and a trap. Any failure would bring swift punishment, and the dragon he was supposed to protect could turn into a ravenous beast, demanding tribute. Still, the coat of arms opened diplomatic doors. Monks copied the young prince's letters in Latin and Greek. At banquets, Germanic emissaries called him Noble Knight of the Dragon. But in quieter corridors, boyars whispered that this foreign symbol attracted unwanted glances from Sultan Murad. This conflict of loyalties, being guardian of the cross and neighbor to a powerful Islamic crescent, prepared Vlad for the difficult equation he would soon face: preserving the faith while saving his own life. When Vlad was just 11 years old, a caravan crossed the icy Carpathian passes carrying a gift to Sultan Murad II. Two Wallachian princes, Vlad and his younger brother. Officially, it was a gesture of goodwill to seal peace. In practice, it was a living bond to ensure their father would pay tribute to the Ottoman Empire. Thus, young Dracula left the stone courtyards of Targovishtu for the marble pavilions of Edirne, the Ottoman capital, where minarets streaked the sky and the call to prayer echoed 5 times a day. In the first few months, Vlad felt the weight of humiliation, no longer heir to a throne, but a hostage in a foreign palace. He slept in guarded quarters, ate under the watchful eye of Janissary guards, and discovered that any stubbornness could result in lashings, punishments he endured in silence, vowing never to cry in front of his captors. Even so, the Ottoman court was no dark dungeon. Teachers forced princes to study Turkish, Persian, and Arabic, in addition to the Quran, a strategy to civilize future vassals. Vlad absorbed every lesson, not out of devotion, but to know the enemy from within. Meanwhile, Radu, charismatic and mild-mannered, adapted quickly, winning the favor of Crown Prince Mehmed. Vlad watched with suspicion. He understood that anyone who proved useful to the Ottomans could gain military support to rule Wallachia one day, but at the price of eternal obedience to Istanbul. Thus began the rivalry between the brothers that would shape their entire adult lives. In addition to his lessons, Vlad trained with Turkish swordsmen, masters of horse archery, and above all learned siege tactics and the logistics of massive armies, knowledge that would later turn against his own masters. Every saber stroke taught by the Janissaries was coldly memorized. Every rule of palace etiquette was studied like a piece on a chessboard. In his rare moments of leisure, Vlad would watch long lines of Christian prisoners march to imperial buildings and feel his resentment brew. He concluded that mercy was in short supply in that part of the world, and that to survive he would need to inspire even greater fear than the Turks. After about 4 years, Murad II deemed the son of the dragon sufficiently tamed to be useful. The Sultan released Vlad, hoping he would return to Wallachia as an allied ruler. But young Dracula arrived home with something the Ottomans had not anticipated: an iron determination to never again be anyone's pawn. He knew the enemy's weaknesses, spoke their language, and carried in his heart a flame of vengeance that would soon ignite Wallachian politics. When Vlad stepped onto Wallachian soil again, winter had not yet let up. Frozen rivers formed opaque mirrors, and the biting wind reminded him that every misstep could be fatal. He was only 17, but he carried the dark look of someone who had known chains and whips. The crown of Wallachia had been changing hands since his father was assassinated. Now the throne was in the clutches of Vladislav II, an ally of the Hungarians who treated the boyars as disposable pawns. This climate of instability provided the perfect breeding ground for Vlad to plot his political chess game. The opportunity arose when King Ladislaus V of Hungary ordered Vladislaus II to march against the Turks in the Balkans. The enemy army's path left Targovishte, the Wallachian capital, vulnerable like a fortress without a gate. Vladis, discreetly financed by disgruntled nobles and supported by a small Ottoman contingent that saw an advantage in a sympathetic ruler, advanced like a diving hawk. In the dead of night he entered the city with fewer than 800 men, but with the conviction of thousands. At dawn, banners bearing the Red Dragon fluttered above the citadel's towers. Vlad summoned the leading boyars to an urgent council. Some appeared hesitantly, others were brought in with fire and sword. There, he proclaimed himself voivod, sovereign prince, backed by 2 indisputable arguments: blood right and the need for a strong leader against external threats. Many swore allegiance to force, but they were aware of the swiftness with which he imposed order on the trials. Thieves were hanged in the square before the afternoon bell rang. conspirators had their heads displayed at the gates. This raw display of authority instilled fear and, paradoxically, a sense of security the people had not experienced in decades. However, the flame of this first conquest burned out as quickly as it had been lit. Vladislav II, upon learning of the usurpation, abandoned the campaign and returned in a rage, leading Hungarian troops far larger than the army of young Dracula. Within weeks, a suffocating siege had formed around Targovište. With no time to reinforce the walls or gather allies, Vlad realized that fighting would not be bravery, but suicide. He escaped under cover of night, riding across the snowy hills to seek refuge in Moldavia, where a maternal uncle still held some power. This first ascent, brief as lightning, yet resounding, taught Vlad something no Ottoman master had revealed to him. Ruling Wallachia required more than audacity. It required deep roots among the people and, above all, the unbreakable loyalty of the boyars. He vowed to return with enough strength that no one would ever drive him out again. And as he trudged the muddy roads toward exile, each step echoed with a promise: "I will return. And when I return, I will bring with me terror that shakes the earth." 8 winters passed, and the name Dracula began to circulate again in the halls of Hungary. Across the Danube, King Matthias Corvinus needed a steadfast ally against Sultan Mehmed II, now famous for conquering Constantinople. Vlad presented himself as the perfect blade to cut off the Ottoman route to Central Europe, and offered tokens of loyalty: maps of Turkish fortresses, supply routes he had learned as a hostage, and above all the promise to rule Wallachia with an iron fist, at no cost to the Hungarian crown. Matthias saw a valuable piece in this and assembled him a lean but disciplined army. In the early summer of 1456, 1,500 Hungarian knights crossed the valleys, followed by hundreds of Wallachian peasants who, tired of plunder and taxes, marched alongside Vlad in the hope of stability. Within days, smaller castles fell like dominoes. The young voivode avoided long sieges, preferring night attacks, strategic fires on bridges, and small ambushes in gorges. Each victory was celebrated with brief speeches. He would say, "We do not fight for glory. We fight so that our children may sleep without fear of the alarm bell." This simple but powerful message ignited heart. When they reached the gates of Targovište, Vlad encountered no resistance. Many boyars had fled, remembering the severity he had shown years before. Still, in the throne room, Vlad made a point of receiving each local lord individually. Those who swore fealty left with their cloaks intact. Those who faltered were detained for inquiry. It is said that that same night, torches illuminated the field outside the walls, revealing stakes driven into the ground, a silent warning that clemency had narrow limits. Once firmly on the throne, Vlad initiated swift reforms. He ordered the repair of watchtowers along the Danube, established unified tax offices to prevent each village from inventing its own tax, and created highway patrols that whipped thieves instead of simply fining them. The brutality was shocking, but the effect was immediate. Merchants could cross Wallachia without fear of robbery, and within weeks, markets began to thrive again. For many simple folk, this peace bought at the price of terror seemed like a miracle. Meanwhile, Sultan Mehmed, busy waging wars in Anatolia, received alarming reports. The son of the dragon rules again and defies tribute. In contrast to the submissive behavior of his brother Radu, now allied with the Ottomans, Vlad refused to send coins or young men to the Sultan's army. Mehmed growled that Dracula would need more than stakes to hold him down. Once firmly on the throne, Vlad realized that written decrees were not enough to curb decades of treason and banditry. The law needed to be engraved in the collective memory. He chose a simple message, visible for miles: for each crime tried, theft, corruption, conspiracy, there was a sharpened stake upon which the guilty party was raised in full view. No distinction was made, peasant or boyar. Whoever crossed the line would die the same way. Accounts from Saxon merchants reveal the extent of the shock. Roads previously infested with robbers began to display motionless silhouettes at sunset, forming wooden corridors that seemed to watch every traveler. The result? Almost no thefts were recorded that first year. But the policy of terror went beyond physical punishment. Vlad had letters copied, detailing the impalement, and sent to neighboring towns, propaganda calculated to make the enemy tremble before they even marched. To his own subjects he offered clear rules: protected markets, standardized taxes, and swift justice. Some were grateful for the first time a vendor could cross Walia with a purse full of coins and arrive at his destination in one piece. Peace, however macabre, was worth its weight in gold. For the nobles, the message came at a fateful Easter banquet. Vlad invited about 200 boyars, who in previous years had repeatedly switched sides. After wine and music, he ordered them arrested and marched into the night to rebuild the Ponari fortress in the mountains. Many died of exhaustion. The survivors understood that there would be no future pardon. The Wallachian aristocracy, accustomed to conspiring, discovered that now conspiring was synonymous with disappearance. This combination of fear and order stirred controversy even among Christian allies. Some Western chroniclers called Vlad a nightmare tyrant. Still, Matthias Corvinus maintained his support for him. Reputation mattered little if the Hungarian border remained free of Turkish bands. Pope Pius II himself wrote that the voivode was a harsh instrument of providence. But every stake driven along the roadside also stung Ottoman pride. Mehmed II, already angered by the refusal of tribute, decided the time had come to uproot the dragon. In 1462 he assembled a massive army, many say over 100,000 men, and headed north, certain to crush the voivode as one would snuff out a flickering candle. Summer had barely begun when Wallachian patrols saw clouds of dust engulfing the horizon. Sultan Mehmed II was leading an army so vast that, according to the chronicles, its marching song covered the countryside like thunder without rain. Vlad, with forces 10 times smaller, ordered the scorched earth tactic. He burned crops, emptied wells, and withdrew entire villages to the hills, leaving only smoke and silence for the enemy. At night, archers ambushed isolated groups. By day, small Turkish parties found crosses marked with skulls, warnings that all of Wallachia watched through the gaps in the natural walls of the Carpathians. But the real blow fell on the new moon of June 17th. In total darkness, Vlad donned a captured Janissary coat and led just over 7,000 stealthy men to the edge of the immense Turkish camp, guided by distant torches and the natural jumble of tents that stretched out like a city. The objective was simple and bold: attack the central pavilion, kill or capture the Sultan, and sow enough panic to break the giant's morale. When the signal, a raven's cry, echoed through the Wallachian ranks, the night split into flashes, incendiary arrows fired at oilcloth, enemy drums interrupted by rapid thrusts, stampeding horses, trampling campfires. Vlad advanced to the third guard ring, striking at astonished watchmen, but a navigational error led him to the tent of 2 viziers, not mere maids. Even so, the damage was done. The Ottoman heart beat in unison with fear, for no one knew who would attack or where the next flames would come from. The climax of the terror came at dawn, when the Ottomans retreated toward the Targovist road and encountered a macabre spectacle. A forest of 20,000 stakes lined both sides of the road, each bearing a body, prisoners from previous skirmishes, and condemned criminals. The stench, the fog, and the ballet of crows painted a picture that not even the Sultan, a veteran of Constantinople, could endure without shuddering. Many soldiers fell to their knees, convinced they were facing a ruler beloved by the devil himself. Despite failing to capture Mehmed, Vlad achieved his goal. He demoralized his adversary, killed thousands, and proved that, in the shadows, size matters not. The Sultan, deeming the campaign too costly, turned south, citing urgent concerns within the empire. Walaya, devastated but free, celebrated the retreat as a miracle wrung from the blade. When the last Ottoman banners disappeared beyond the Danube, Walaya seemed like an endless battlefield, burned villages, potholed roads, and empty coffers. Yet Vlad wasted no time kicking up ashes. He armed himself with an administrative brush, and as firmly as he wielded his sword began reshaping his principality. First, he tackled the fiscal chaos. Each village levied a different tax, and middlemen lined their pockets before a single coin reached the castle. Vlad created a single dragon tribute, a fixed amount per head of household, collected directly by the voivode's emissaries. Anyone who tried to invent a parallel tax ended up, as everyone knew, decorating a roadside stake. Within months, the princely coffers were once again ringing, and foreign merchants, thirsting for stability, began to prefer Wallachian routes to mountain detours. With money in hand, the voivode invested where it hurt most: security and infrastructure. He ordered repairs to wooden bridges connecting distant markets, reinforced riverside fortresses to guard secret Danube crossings, and established permanent road patrols. These horsemen, called Kalarashi, had clear orders. A thief caught red-handed lost his freedom and sometimes his life. The brutality was frightening, but the effect was instantaneous. The Saxon merchant could travel 200 kilometers with a purse full of silver and arrive unharmed, something unthinkable before the Dracula regime. To stimulate internal trade, Vlad instituted bi-weekly fairs in strategic cities such as Katia Dargesh and Giurgiu. He announced them with trumpets and decreed tax exemptions on the first day, attracting leather workers, blacksmiths, and winemakers. The peasant population, previously held hostage by local lords, now found direct buyers and, as a bonus, armed protection on the roads. German accounts recount that a Wallachian peasant could leave a bag of gold on the road and return 2 days later without missing a coin. A typical exaggeration, but one that illustrates the leap of confidence inspired by disciplined terror. Vlad also shifted the balance of power. By reducing the boyars' hereditary privileges and demanding regular court attendance, he forced the aristocracy to expose itself to his scrutiny. In councils, he imposed strict schedules, prohibited whispering, and if caught sharing secrets, he did not hesitate to impose exemplary punishments. In this way, he consolidated a loyal bureaucracy, more obedient to the voivode than to the ancient bloodlines. At the same time, he encouraged the construction of fortified churches in vulnerable villages, providing refuge from bandits and invaders. The Orthodox Church gained ground, but under conditions priests were required to teach local children to read and write using Slavic manuscripts, a cultural policy gesture that reinforced Wallachian identity at a time when Turkish and Hungarian languages competed for space. In short, Vlad turned fear into a foundation. Where there had been dust and looters, noisy markets sprang up. Where distrust reigned, patrols pounded their hooves at dawn. It was a paradoxical flowering, fertilized by stakes but watered with pragmatism. Soon after expelling the Ottoman army, Vlad realized that to maintain his newly won independence, he still needed to play to the tune of his more powerful neighbor, the Kingdom of Hungary, ruled by Matthias Corvinus. For a few years, the partnership suited both. Matthias, an ambitious warrior, delighted in displaying the feared son of the dragon as a living shield against Turkish incursions. Vlad, in turn, relied on artillery, Hungarian steel, and gold loans to reinforce fortresses along the Danube. But trust in medieval politics is worth less than the weight of a feather. As caravans once again filled the Wallachian coffers, Matthias began to fear that his ally was becoming a competitor. At the same time, Pope Pius II was pushing for a new crusade, and Hunvan needed to justify why the project was not getting off the ground. It was then that compromising letters appeared, supposedly written by Vlad, promising to submit to Sultan Mehmed II in exchange for protection. Most historians believe these documents were forged by Saxon diplomats, commercial enemies of the voivodate, who wanted to escape the harsh taxes and exemplary impoundments he imposed on his merchants. The proof was a perfect fit. In December 1462, Matthias invited Vlad to a military planning meeting in Buda. As soon as the voivode entered the gilded halls, he was surrounded by Hungarian guards, shackled and taken to the Visegrad fortress on the banks of the Danube. There, he spent 12 long years amid chains, theology books and, according to legend, iron clasps that kept him away from the windows. Ironically, the same king he had helped protect now displayed him as a trophy, proof that Hungary punished traitors. During his captivity, Vlad married Ilona. Silagi, a relative of Matthias, sealed a family truce that softened his terms. He gained access to the royal library, debated strategy with knights, and gradually rebuilt a network of supporters. Exiled Orthodox nobles, bishops who still saw him as a bulwark against the Turks, and of course former Wallachian soldiers who longed for safe roads. Meanwhile, his brother Radu, docile to the Sultan, ruled Wallachia, but could not fully control the boyars who had grown accustomed to the impaler's heavy hand. The political wind shifted in 1475 when Mehmed II attacked Matthias's Moldavian ally. Suddenly, having an experienced commander on the front lines became urgent again. The Hungarian king released Vlad III, restored his properties, and gave him a small army. In exchange, he demanded official conversion to Catholicism, a diplomatic gesture that would facilitate requests for help from Rome. Vlad accepted the condition without hesitation. For him, rituals mattered little. The goal was to regain the throne and sweep away Ottoman influence once and for all. In late 1476, Dracula crossed the Danube again, this time side by side with Stephen the Great, Prince of Moldavia. They found a fragmented Wallachia, but still remembered for the silence his stakes had imposed on crime. Many peasants rose up in his favor, convinced that only Vlad could curb Turkish tribute and guarantee free markets. In December of that year, he donned the Wallachia crown for the third time, but the clock was ticking faster than ever. As winter curled around the Carpathian pines, Vlad crossed the Danube for the last time, this time flanked by Stephen the Great of Moldavia and Hungarian knights eager to stem the Turkish advance. The riverbanks were covered in thin ice that crackled under the horses' hooves. Nature itself seemed hesitant to allow the impaler to return. Still, villagers, exhausted from paying tribute to the Sultan, rushed to the roads with torches raised. The dragon was returning, and with him the hope that the blood tribute would cease once more. Targovishte capitulated almost without resistance. Radu had died months earlier, and the puppet voivode the Turks had left on the throne fled at the first banner with the red dragon. Inside the main hall, Vlad climbed the same stone steps he had known since childhood, but now his hair was streaked with grey, and his gaze bore the invisible scars of years of captivity. There was no solemn coronation, only the sharp sound of a sword striking the arm of the royal chair, as if driving a stake into one's own destiny. Peasants sang improvised hymns in the squares. Boyars, remembering the bloody feast of years past, swore fealty with trembling voices. The first orders were pragmatic: urgently repair walls, gather grain and salt for an impending siege, and reorganize patrols on the southern and eastern borders. Vlad knew Mehmed II would not ignore his return. While masons built watchtowers with stone salvaged from ruins, messengers galloped to Buda and Iyasir, calling for reinforcements that might never arrive in time. Still, for a few weeks, Wallachia was thriving again. Markets reopened, blacksmiths sold horseshoes for their weight in gold, and at night, taverns exchanged stories about how the impaler had tricked hell itself into returning. But the siege on their destiny quickly tightened. Ottoman troops, led by boyars still nursing a grudge, crossed the Jurju River like a hot blade through butter. Vlad III, with diminished forces, did not retreat. In December, he donned his black armor and led 100 knights into a marshy valley near Bucharest, attempting to ambush the enemy advance. The night fell cold and moonless, recalling the daring of 4062, but this time luck turned its back. A Turkish patrol intercepted the Wallachians before the surprise attack. The battle reportedly lasted only a short time. A whirlwind of spears, arrows, and ice shattered under hooves. When the torchlight faded, only a handful of Wallachian horsemen stood covered in mud and red-tinged snow. Vlad's body was never found by his family. Some say he fell, recognizable only by the dragon emblem engraved on the chest of his armor. Others insist he escaped wounded and briefly hid before being betrayed by coerced peasants. What is certain is that days later the impaler's head appeared impaled on a spear outside the gates of Istanbul, sent as a trophy to Mehmed II. Thus ended, at least officially, the reign of only 2 months that had promised another long winter of stakes. When the black-helmed head appeared, raised on spears, before the walls of Istanbul, Ottoman messengers proclaimed victory. The dragon was dead, and his bloodied mane would be displayed as a reminder to Christians. But the very haste in publicizing the trophy sowed the first doubts. In Wallachia, peasants swore they saw Vlad wounded but alive, riding through the forests of Vlachia shortly after the battle. In Buda, Saxon diplomats received reports that the body taken to Constantinople was so mutilated that no one except his enemies would recognize it with certainty. The chronicles differ on every detail. Ottoman chroniclers claim that Janissary soldiers found the voivode lying with arrows in his back and beheaded him right there in the frozen swamp of the Dona Valley. Moldovan annals, however, say that Vlad was betrayed by boyars. Wallachians, while trying to cross an icy river, tripping over his own heavy armor. Another version, supported by monks from the Snagov monastery, says that wounded, he managed to retreat to a hermitage on an island in Lake Snagov, where he expired after confessing sins that only God could judge. Confusion grows with the burial stories. 16th century documents indicate that the body was hastily buried in the church of the Snagov monastery under a simple stone slab. In 1933, archaeologists unearthed this tomb and found only horse bones. A few meters away, another empty tomb revealed headless human remains, but forensic tests at the time were inconclusive. In 2014, Romanian researchers attempted to trace DNA from alleged descendants and compare it to bone material stored in museums, but the samples were too contaminated to reach a verdict. Topkapi Palace collections. 17th century records mention an infidel's skull with an iron crown, but it disappeared during subsequent renovations. Without the central piece, the official Ottoman narrative lost credibility, and with it opened the door to conspiracy theories worthy of a Gothic novel. Some suggest that Hungarian mercenaries stole the skull to demand ransom from Vlad's heirs. Others that Wallachian monks paid in gold to secretly return it and bury it in sacred grounds. Vlad III's death remains an echo in the mountains. Every village holds its own version. Every ruin carries a whisper that the impaler still rides on foggy nights, inspecting silent roads. This uncertainty fueled for centuries a magnetism surrounding the name Dracula, a magnetism so strong that it leaped from chronicles to folklore and later to world literature. As the centuries passed, the name Vlad Tepes metamorphosed like a chameleon exposed to different lights. In Romania, Orthodox chronicles extol him as the shield that held back the Islamic Sea when the rest of Europe hesitated. Peasants still tell the story of the voivode who punished thieves and ensured that a woman could cross the forest wearing a gold necklace without losing a single grain. On national holidays, schools recite poems in which the impaler appears not as a monster, but as a martyr of independence, someone who chose to inspire terror to buy, with blood, a little peace for his people. Outside his mountains, however, Vlad became a creature of nightmares. Saxon merchants who suffered his taxes carried pamphlets back to Germany, filled with macabre illustrations depicting forests of impaled men, cauldrons of boiling oil, and banquets lit by burning corpses. These pamphlets, a kind of medieval tabloid, traveled across the continent, portraying the voivode as the most sadistic tyrant ever born under the cross. 3 centuries later, when British writers were scouring old archives for exotic characters, the Irishman Bram Stoker found these raw accounts. He blended documented cruelty with Carpathian vampire folklore and gave his count a name that sounded like thunder: Dracula. Beginning in 1897, the legend gained teeth that shine to this day. Bran Castle, which Vlad visited only in passing, became a selfie spot for entire groups of backpackers. Hotels offer vampire garlic soup, and tour guides narrate supposed secret passages filled with chains that creak in the wind. Meanwhile, museums in Targovishte display authentic suits of armor alongside Hollywood movie posters, proof that the myth helped fund the restoration of historic towers. This contrast makes Vlad a unique character, hero and villain, protector and predator, warrior saint or archdemon, depending on the narrator's language. And it is precisely this ambiguity that fuels heated debates in classrooms, online forums and bar counters, discussions about the line between justice and terror, about how the political context colors collective memory. When the flames of the stakes died down and the parchments cooled, the question that has lingered for centuries like a nagging whisper remained: was Vlad III a martyr or a monster? Ask Wallachian peasants, and you'll hear stories of safe roads and thriving markets. The just voivode who cut off thieves' hands so you could sleep with your door open. Saxon merchants, meanwhile, will chronicle forests of impaled bodies, cauldrons of boiling oil, and blood-soaked banquets in illustrated pamphlets, portraying him as a raving tyrant. The Orthodox monks of Snugov extol his Christian zeal. He defended monasteries, donated land to churches, and funded copies of the Gospels in Church Slavonic. In contrast, Catholic missionaries from the Hungarian kingdom describe him as a savage ruler, unworthy of a knight's crown. Behind this criticism was the fact that Vlad kept Wallachia faithful to orthodoxy, refusing forced conversion. Ottoman diplomats, however, called him Kazikli Bey, the Lord of the Stakes, a title that blended fearful respect and fierce hatred. Among Romanians themselves, the debate rages with each generation. Nationalist historians emphasize that their cruelty was calculated, a lesser evil to protect borders and deter traitors. Critical researchers point out that many impaled were peasants who had failed to pay taxes, or boyars eliminated on suspicion, without the right to trial. The line between justice and brutality becomes blurred when the judge wields the sword of the law and the punishing blade is the same. And then there's the filter of time. Centuries later, psychologists analyze Vlad as an example of utilitarian tyranny, while political theorists study his governance by fear as the embryo of the concept of a strong state. Filmmakers, in turn, embrace the dark side and transform it into a gothic spectacle where violence becomes a box office draw. In each painting, book, or speech, the impaler is reborn with different nuances, mirroring the anxieties of those who invoke him. Perhaps the truth lies in the convergence of these extremes, Vlad III was a product of an era when the survival of a tiny principality depended on extreme decisions. His stakes, while sweeping away crime, also sowed indiscriminate terror. He was a hero to a besieged people, and a nightmare for any foreigner who dared cross their borders without permission. Before each battle, Vlad sharpened not only his blades, but also the minds of those who feared him. He understood that sometimes a rumor could cross mountains faster than an army and kill an enemy's courage before they even crossed swords. When he impaled traitors on the roads, he didn't let the wind carry the stench to chance. He sent messengers to neighboring kingdoms with letters detailing the punishment, describing the exact height of the stakes and the number of bodies that swung at sunset. These sordid tales reached the taverns of Hungary and the mosques of Edauner, sending soldiers into a cold sweat long before they donned their chainmail. He also manipulated symbols. The dragon on his standard gold on a red field was displayed in strategic locations, always well lit by torches, so that spies could bring the image back to rival commanders. In Saxon cities, pamphlets filled with macabre woodcuts began to circulate. Many were commissioned by the voivode himself, who feigned indignation as he watched the enemy spread his own fear-mongering. Thus, each new story, real or exaggerated, multiplied his size, transforming a modest principality into a colossal shadow in the eyes of those who approached. Even his allies experienced the power of this theater. At diplomatic banquets, Vlad would calmly report the statistics of his executions as if he were counting the harvest. Boyars contemplating conspiring would leave the table with their imaginations filled with screams they had never heard. It was pure psychology. He knew that if his adversary's mind broke first, the body would follow without much resistance. In the end, the Kazikli Bey, the lord of the stakes, won more battles with rumors than with arrows. And these rumors, steeped in blood and superstition, did not die with him. They traveled through the centuries, reinventing themselves in books, films, and tourist memes. Vlad's ghosts are worth as much as gold, or rather, they're worth dollars, euros, and yuan. The so-called Dracula's castle in Bran rises dramatically on a cliff that looks like a movie set. Irony: Vlad probably spent no more than a few hours there, but it doesn't matter. Bilingual signs advertise candlelit nighttime tours. Guides in black cloaks tell how, in the towers, the voivode sharpened stakes on foggy nights. The line snakes around the courtyard, and every selfie in front of the Gothic walls feeds social media, free advertising that the impaler himself would approve with a wry smile. The local economy has surrendered to the myth. In Brasov bakeries sell dragon bread dusted with red sugar. Kiosks offer steak-shaped refrigerator magnets, and boutique hotels include aromatic garlic baths in their spas, all under the pretense of warding off vampires. The result? Before 1990, fewer than 100,000 tourists visited the region annually. Now, more than 2 million visit, pouring millions of euros into roads, museums, and peasant restaurants that Vlad would probably find too simple. Even universities profit. Summer courses on mythology and national identity fill auditoriums with students who, at night, walk trails lit only by lanterns, swearing they hear spectral horses in the undergrowth. Even digital marketing was not left out. Influencers stage vampire hunts in 40-second reels. Streamers give live tours of the castle's narrow corridors, their chats exploding with bat emojis. The Romanian Ministry of Tourism, sensing this trend, launched campaigns with the slogan "Real Home of Dracula" and themed maps that connect fortresses, sweet shops, and monasteries on a 7-day itinerary, 7 of course to echo the number of stakes that, according to legend, Vlad erected for each betrayal. But some question it. Local historians complain that Hollywood's Dracula eclipses the historical Vlad, a military hero, a stern lawgiver, a complex figure beyond the vampire label. Heritage groups are fighting to ensure that visitors also see Targovishte, the voivode's true capital, and Poenari, the fortress he himself reinforced, difficult to access 1,180 steps up the mountain, with no souvenir shop at the top. Even so, Poenari is beginning to gain attention, as nothing is as convincing as the real-life setting where the bloodthirsty decisions were made. In the end, Vlad III has won another battle, this time against death itself, by converting fear into currency. Amidst LED-lit facades and display cases filled with mini-stakes, the Lord of the Stakes reinvents himself daily, proving that some legends never rest in peace, especially when they continue to pay the bills of an entire region. And you? Would you travel through these dark lands? Tell us in the comments which stop on the dragon's route fascinates you most. And of course, leave a like so we can explore other epic figures that history or legend can barely contain. Until the next adventure.